Hello viewers, greetings from the report. This is our pre-COP session, special arrangement before COP28, and we have with us today Mr. Zakir Hossain Khan. He is the Executive Director of Change Initiative, and he is an eminent climate finance expert in Bangladesh. He attended many COPs. We will talk with him only for financial issues. So welcome, Zakir bhai.
Thank you.
So first of all, I want to know that what is climate finance and what is the current situation, and do you have any suggestion in this regard that this way it can be disbursed?
Thank you. Thank you very much for arranging such a very timely interventions in terms of what is the current status. You know, after the Paris Agreement back in 2015, this is the year of the global stocktake. So what we have achieved and what has not achieved, and what is the reason behind that. In terms of that, this is the very timely interventions indeed to know what is the happening in terms of the climate finance. You know that in the Copenhagen 2019, it was told that the developed countries, who are usually treated and known to the world as a major carbon emitting countries. So they would provide new and addition to the ODA as a climate finance. And unfortunately, that was the demand from the developing country, that developed countries should provide $100 billion per year as a climate finance from 2022 to 2025. Though OECD countries have already claimed that they have provided $100 billion in terms of the number, but in terms of the quality of the finance, Oxfam have already revealed that this amount should not be more than $22 to $26 billion per year. So this is very unfortunate in terms of the transparency matters. And in terms of the delivery of the climate finance, and this is also very insignificant for the adaptation. You know, the LDC countries are mostly very much vulnerable, so they need more adaptation finance. And annually, it is around $140 billion to $200 billion per year is required. So far, they have received only 10% of their adaptation needs. So this is unfortunate, very unfortunate. And what is happening? Happening is that the developed country has already established the Green Climate Fund, and a developing country is also part of the process. But in last 8 years, and more than 8 years, 10 years, they have delivered only $10 billion. If we can count it as a per capita allocations of the climate finance, it is around $30 to $40 per capita allocation for the LDCs population. So this is the reality in terms of the vulnerability, in terms of the growing disasters. The allocation is too peanuts. So it is a lukewarm in a sense, I can tell you.
In this situation, do you think that country-specific allocation disbursement can be helpful?
One thing, country-specific allocation, according to the vulnerability rankings, the country which is the most vulnerable, they would get the priority in the funding. I mean, if I can just make it something very clear, this proportionate funding of the allocations from the country specific, and other things which is not the really very much priority in a sense that long-term investment is required, like for the the construction of any things, the infrastructures, that could be competitive in a manner. But the problem is that current modalities of the finance is mostly biased to the better-known systems. It should be more democratic decision-making process and country-driven approach, which has been clearly defined in the Paris Agreement. The climate finance should be allocated according to the country-driven approach, which is really right now absent.
We are going about fossil fuel. It's called the disease of climate change. And we know that the developed countries subsidize fossil fuel largely. What is your opinion in this regard?
Claim from the developing countries regarding that they are very much keen to mitigate the crisis, mitigate the carbon emission, but unfortunately in reality it is not. If you see, compared to the figures in 2021 and 2022, the allocation by the G20 countries to the public subsidies to the fossil fuel have been increased. And the last year in 2022, they have already allocated $1.4 trillion as a public subsidy. So, at the same time, they have allocated almost more than $2 trillion spent on the war finance. So, if you see that if only 10% of the public subsidy to the fossil fuel has been diverted, it is $140 billion per year. And that could be diverted for adaptation and the newly proposed loss and damage funding for the LDC countries. So, that is the matter of only willingness of the developing country, whether they have been prioritized. The vulnerabilities means that people are dying due to the droughts, people have been displaced due to the cyclones and other disasters. But whether they are responding, they would respond or not, that is their willingness. Because Paris Agreement has already included a very dubious article, as in a decision is a decision 51. These decisions have waived them to provide their loss as a compensation-based funding. So that's why I'm saying the fossil fuel-based subsidy should be 100% curtailed. Otherwise, that would not also, that has been actually contributing to the global warming as well. So, and also that has been used, which has been probably used for the adaptation, that has been used for the for the carbon emissions. So this is the priority should be given, and developing country in the COP28 particularly focus on that. They give a clear, the clear message to the developed country. Either they would curtail the fossil fuel subsidy, public subsidy, and divert to the LDC. Otherwise, they would go for the carbon taxing in the 2025. This is the clear options for the LDCs.
We have a question about loss and damage fund, but before that, you mentioned carbon tax. How countries like Bangladesh, we are largely dependent on developed countries, how can we impose carbon tax on them?
It should be the combined decision of the LDCs, because otherwise Bangladesh can impose the carbon tax, but if not other country impose, Bangladesh can be deprived from the global the gain from the global other developed countries. So that should be LDC. The LDC 77 has a group, so they should come up with the uniform decision. We have a vulnerability forum. B20 groups are there. They should have a combined decisions. The carbon tax would not be imposed in the land of the LDCs. It should be imposed by the developed country whenever their shipment has been ready in the port for importing to the LDCs. Otherwise, that would be actually burdensome. Another burden will be created for the consumers of the LDCs. So that should be, and especially I can refer aviation industry, shipping industry, and also the luxury goods and other things that could be under the purview of the carbon tax. And this is the way it should be proceed on. And loss and damage fund should be granted. You cannot say compensation comes as a concessionary loan. I mean, it is a very much irrational thinking and irrational proposal that compensation would be the loan, because that should not be. And other things that whenever the Bretton Woods system would be included as a part of the operating the loss and damage finance, it is always matter of the conflict of interest, because the World Bank is at the same time is the funding entity, and they cannot actually regulate the fund at all. Then that's really transparency issue. And I could say that separate entity should be set up in the under the UNFCCC to manage the loss and damage under the offshore international mechanisms. And the World Bank should not be the trustee about it. Another funding into even new funding, because this is not the end. Loss and damage, as long as we are observing that 2030 would not be the solution, what we are actually thinking of that might be, we have to go beyond that. So a separate window should be opened. And finally, I can say in the terms of the carbon tax, it is a matter of human rights. You are consuming more and you are producing more carbon emissions, but you are not taking the burden. So this is a matter of a climate justice. And this climate justice should be prevail in everywhere across the planet, wherever it is. And I can finally tell you that nature has no boundary at all. So the global governance systems should be reformed, as a nature-centric green governance is really important. Where any carbon emissions, any pollutions, it is go beyond the boundary. State level decision will not work. We have to focus mainly on how the public goods actually deals. Whenever it comes across boundary pollutions, you have to make a decisions cross-boundary. You cannot unilaterally, India cannot say they could just restrict their polluted air to flow to the Bangladesh. It cannot do that. So decisions should be joint. And that is a fundamental problem of the UNFCCC, that they have taken decision by the state parties, but their companies, fossil fuel-based companies, are not accountable to anywhere. That's why we see Indian companies not establishing coal-based power plant in their country. They are dumping in Bangladesh, Chinese or Japanese, any companies. They are taking the profits from the Bangladesh, from the coal-based power plant, but they are not taking the burden of the carbon emission here. That should be deposited in the Indian part, Indian country state, but they are not taking this. This is the purely flaws of the Paris Agreement. So this is the global stocktake time, and that should be also, there is a scope for the revision in the Paris Agreement to think about that, make it more equitable, justified, and more sustainability focused.
We have a term, global stocktake. So it's new for those who are not regularly discuss the climatic issues. Can you please describe this term for our audience and more on this, please?
You know, the Paris Agreement have been signed in 2000, have been adopted in 2015, but have been ratified by the 196 parties in 2016. So it was told that after 10 years, we would review what so far we have achieved according to the targets of the Paris Agreement in terms of carbon emission reduction, in terms of the adaptation actions, in terms of the global goal on adaptation efforts, in terms of the mitigations, in terms of the finance. So these, after 10 years, every country have already submitted their national determined contributions. So based on their contributions, I mean what they have already promised or they have pledged, they would do something in mitigation or adaptation. That would be reviewed, how far they have been achieved country level as well as global level. So based on that, for another 5 years, after 2030, that should be revised and action should be adopted accordingly. And might be the NDC can be revised again in 2025 for readjusting the targets. So that is actually should be in the global stocktake, but it depends on how transparently every information, especially on the carbon emission reduction process or the carbon emission of particular fossil fuel industry, really been disclosed or not. So this is fundamentally very important. Without proper mitigations, nothing will happen in that, even though there is the adaptation. So mitigation means the carbon emission, drastic curtail of the carbon emission is the reality and is the priority of the whole global planetary existence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zakir Hossain Khan, for your very insightful interview with us, the report. Thank you very much. Thank you again.